Hello to all collective listeners. On this episode of the podcast, we have my mentor, Dan Wirth from the University of Tennessee. Dan is currently the director of Olympic sport performance at UT, where he works with softball and rowing. Dan was absolutely pivotal to my development as a strength coach and developing my passion for this field. So I feel very grateful to be able to have him on this episode. During the episode, we talk about a multitude of things from sports technology to his transition from working collegiate setting to private setting to then back to the collegiate setting. And we throw a couple jokes in, obviously, as that's going to happen as a conversation between you and your mentor. So I feel very grateful for him to be on the podcast. Thank you to Dan, and I hope everybody enjoys. Hello, everyone. On the podcast today, we have our guest, Dan Wirth from the University of Tennessee. Dan, awesome to have you.
Awesome to be here, Connor.
For those of you who don't know, Dan and I worked together approximately 2 to 3 years ago. I
Yeah,
was a coaching assistant with Dan. It's probably my favorite boss I've ever had, so I'm extremely excited to talk with him today.
that was awesome. Yeah, and having you here and the way you helped all of us with just our all of our teams, and it was just awesome to have you around and pushing. And your energy was always great, and your creativity is amazing. And the things you used to put up on the TVs for the athletes, that was great.
Oh yeah, the famous Bob the Builder speech,
Yes.
which which worked out well for about one time, and I tried it again. It wasn't very well received.
Great.
So excellent. Well, could you please give us a little background on yourself, starting from I guess your introduction to athletics?
Yeah, gosh. So I'm in my 35th year of coaching.
Wow.
Got certified in the NSCA in 1989. Um, I basically was a graduate assistant at the University of Iowa, where I played, and then went through the process with small colleges, Iowa Wesleyan College, then into University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, then going to Arizona, and was there for 10 years. Ultimately, became the director there, and then went into the private sector and did that for 16 years. And then the kids grew up, and I was no longer, going to baseball, football, swimming, gymnastic practices, and they had their lives, and I still felt great, and just decided that it would be great to go back into the collegiate environment and not having kids and various
Mhm.
other family responsibilities, um, and so yeah, I started traveling around the country, and all of my older GAs and assistants were now like directors of pro teams and
Wow.
collegiate programs. And so I just would just hang out, go to their gym, and just work out and just watch the flow. Did that for a couple of years toward the end there, just to kind of make sure it was the move and the things that I wanted to do. And then ultimately, ended up here at the University of Tennessee. They opened up a director of Olympic performance job. It was the first director. It was a brand new weight room that wasn't finished. So you got to pretty much, come in, set everything up that the way you wanted it. And so it's just been fantastic. And now I've been here for 5 years.
Wow, that's incredible, and that weight room is fantastic. You did a great job of setting it up. If anybody has the opportunity to watch the
It,
videos on it, it's one of my favorite weight rooms I've ever been able to
it's
work
an
in.
awesome training center. The way, the way that I can see 16 racks right now,
Yep.
so that's the process. So when you go out and you're leading, the visual process is good, so it allows you to have a good communication process with the athletes. So
Absolutely, and those are double-sided racks too, so you can fit a massive amount of teams in there.
we can load it up. Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
can go 64 and still have all of the required spacing guidelines. Um, so, of course, weird things got weird during the COVID process, but
Hmm.
we're full pushing now. So it's a lot of energy and it's great.
That's awesome, and a great speaker system too. I remember
It
it was very
rocks.
easy.
It does.
Yes, it was
Rock.
very easy to
Yeah.
get it rolling.
Yeah.
So, well, could you tell us a little bit more about that transition from collegiate athletics to being a private facility owner, and what were kind of the main things that made you make that decision, and then what was that process like making that transition?
Yes. So, um, my kids were like 6 and 8 years old,
Hmm.
and I'd been at Arizona for 10 years, and I wanted an opportunity to be more involved in their process. So I literally did, like, I would go to the class on Wednesdays and be the dad that like would hand out, the
Wow.
blue cardboard paper. And so I was able to do that. That was enjoyable. Um, and I was doing some things with technology, building really just um, software for strength and conditioning, doing that, running my facility. Uh, we had about 40 employees. I had 10 trainers and a bunch of different, yoga and spin bike and the whole process. So that transition was was enjoyable. It allowed me to do some things when my kids were growing up, because when you are, obviously Division 1 coach, and it's
Hmm.
it's you can't really go to practice. I mean, it's tough. So that process was difficult, and being able to have a run your own business and everything. It's not easier, and it's not like your own boss or anything. It's because now you got 700 bosses,
Yep.
so it's different. But I enjoy people. I love communication, and it's the process of training. Continue to do that. Obviously, continue to work with athletes, and so yeah, it was a good move. It allowed more family time, and
Yep.
of course the transition coming back the other way, and we just sort of talked about it, but just making sure I was still up to date with all the cutting edge processes. But it really comes down to, once again, in the process of being a good coach, is being able to listen, being able to communicate, being able to motivate, and I've always been like into the programming stuff, so, and just into geeking out on the programs and the process. But everything is getting buy-in, communicating with your athletes, and having an environment where the athletes want to train hard. And Tennessee has just been fantastic.
That's amazing. And I mean, I'm sure there were some significant differences from when you or were originally within the field and then transitioned back to collegiate athletics. Was there anything that surprised you besides those basics like you talked about?
So so obviously there were tremendous differences, but there were tremendous similarities.
Ah, okay.
Even being out 16 years. So
Wow.
so that the process of training, of teaching, communicating, all that never changes. Um, it, you do you have We have more tools now, and so yeah, there's technology processes, yes. um, you do have to know the communication style is a little bit different for young people now, and what's important to them, uh, but as a whole, um, you know the basics of squatting doesn't change, cleaning doesn't change, exercise
Yep.
selections, primary strength drivers, what are you using in your programming? I mean, the big rocks are the same. It just becomes a process of utilizing some technology. uh, Never had a fueling station in a weight room. That's just like awesome. I mean, what do I scream at the end of the workout? Protein infusion. So we get in there, and there's a lot of support, a lot of stuff. So it's amazing the amount of support that we give the athletes. But the big rocks are still pretty pretty much exactly the same.
That's amazing. That's what kind of what I try to speak to our interns about is that the basics stick around for a reason because they work, So there's, like you said, a squat's always going to be a squat,
Yeah.
And so that's a very interesting process to hear that it is still pretty similar. So I feel like it's a very evolving field where everybody is trying to push the envelope, but to hear that those things stick around, I mean, it makes me feel a little bit better because I put a lot of my stock into that.
So you got some old school in you,
Oh
in
yeah.
a young person. So yeah, you understand the process, but um, as we continue to communicate, in throughout this process here in the podcast, I'm sure we'll touch on some technology things. So that there's some things in there that we'll communicate on, and obviously that's different. I mean, the world is different from that perspective.
Absolutely. And so, one thing that kind of caught my interest was you spoke about a difference between communicating with athletes when you were previously in college athletics versus now. What's the biggest difference that you see?
So uh, the process of motivating an athlete is is different today. Now we can say that I am now super exposed to all Olympic sports.
Yeah.
So when I was at Arizona, I was the director, but primarily worked with football, men's basketball. So that it is it's a process where it's more communicative. In today's athlete, they they seemingly, maybe not completely, but they seemingly know more. They've been exposed to
Mhm.
more. They ask more questions. So there's more educational processes. When I was starting at Arizona in 1990, there wasn't a lot of communication. It was just, you know, let's get after the squats, let's get after the cleans, let's rock and roll. So it's almost the educational part of the athlete today is bigger, and so
Yep.
being able to communicate on their level, whether or not they have great information or not, is always uh, the key thing. But ultimately knowing how to communicate with the athletes and helping them to understand the questions that they ask, and it's just different than what it used to be. So that communication style is different as a whole.
I can only imagine. I mean, especially with the amount of social media content that's out there now. I mean, it's incredible. And one of the things that you imparted upon me when I was able to work with you was if you can't defend it to a room full of 100 people, this probably shouldn't be within your program. And so I had this imaginary room of 100 people, but then all of a sudden when I became the head strength coach, I now had a room of 15 basketball players who I had to defend some of the program to as well
Yeah,
because
so
they
it was there wasn't a whole lot of defense going on,
yeah.
30 years ago, and today there's a lot more communication. I love that though, because that gives us our process of what we're talking about, why we're doing. Use the terms. This is an activation workout. We're going to go higher in intensity today. We're going to drop the volume a little bit. So the athletes are more into that today, and obviously it is all the training online and everything as well. But with people, there's a lot of information out there that the athletes will have, so they generally tend to ask more questions. But it's a great opportunity as a coach to be able to communicate with the athletes.
Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. I think the more that they understand about their training, the more motivated they are, and the
Yeah,
more that they actually want
and
to
why we're
buy into the process.
yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. So that's fantastic. Well, how would you describe your coaching style as a whole?
So I mean, as a whole, I'm a positive person. I'm a I I don't know another term, but other than just logical.
Mhm.
Um, so not a whole lot of fancy different things. Um, so I do like logical progressions. You have to be careful about getting too cute in the programming process. Um, but uh, number one, creating that buy-in, creating the relationship process, that is everything. It's do you have the social awareness, to pick up on communication styles with your athletes? You have to be able to do that in order to be successful. So my style is a style of communication. of logical communication, and it is positive. I don't use negative motivation. If I'm yelling, it's because we're getting pumped up, and it's a way. That's how I've always approached things, even 30 years ago. That's ultimately encapsulates some of the style.
I would say infectiously positive as well.
So,
It was a rare day I would walk into the weight room and Dan Wirth wasn't immediately smiling and trying to put me in a headlock.
hey, we're in a weight room. I mean, what?
Yeah.
We're training. It's awesome. And so I was kind of a gym rat. A lot of strength coaches at some point went through their gym rat process. So it is a very positive place for me. Um, and it's if you can help the athletes see what it does for them, it becomes positive for them too.
Absolutely. And I think one thing we don't, or some strength coaches, just in conversations I've had, don't give enough credit to the athletes is that they're very good at understanding and intercepting coaches' moods. And so when you are allow your negative emotions in your own life to creep over to the weight room, they can really feel it, and I think it really affects the energy of the lift.
Big time. And there's a professionalism aspect to that. I mean, it doesn't matter how you feel or what's going on in your life as a coach. You always have to get back to what the basic foundation of what you're trying to do, and that it is the training of athletes. They don't need to know that, if you didn't sleep good or if something's going
Yep.
on in your life, that's separate. So yeah, keeping everything positive, moving forward, keeping everybody on task. There's a professionalism aspect to that, and you're exactly right. And it's just a process that I've always used, and no one will see if I have a bad day because they should
Yep.
see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's fantastic. It made it very fun for me to come in every day. So I can attest to that for sure. And so we've talked about the athletes as a whole. Was there any difference that you've noticed in running a staff, a strength and conditioning staff, from your time in Arizona to now at Tennessee?
You know, really no difference in the staff. This staff is bigger. It's like three
Mhm.
times as big, um, and that the key thing with staff members is that I have more so than 30 years ago starting out. The process of personal development for the staff is important to me. If a staff member feels like they are progressing and they're getting better and they're being supported, then ultimately that creates a better staff member. If there is a process as well where everyone kind of also has things that they do really well and things that aren't so well, I do, everyone does. So if you can maximize what they do well and what they're successful in,
Mhm.
that's also very helpful. So just being supportive, recognizing what they do well, encouraging growth and development. Uh, that's I look at that more than I did when I was in my 20s and 30s.
Absolutely. And that's interesting too, because a lot of my contacts obviously are from Tennessee because I spent 2 years there. But
Yes.
what you said about maximizing what these specific coaches do well, I mean,
Mhm.
each of these coaches that I've met at Tennessee, I now use as kind of a resource for specific things.
How about
Like,
that?
it's
Yep.
incredible.
Is it
Like Johnny Fabrizius is the sports science guy. If I have any questions for him, I go to Johnny. If
boom?
I want any culture development, I'll talk with Greg.
That-
So I feel like that's certainly something that shined through with your program is the maximization of, I don't even know if that's a true word, but
I like,
of of each staff member's potential.
yes. That
Absolutely.
that's the key. That's the key. Everyone's good, pretty
Hmm.
much across the board on everything. But certain people are special in certain things, and those are the things that need to be supported and accentuated and developed, and just making sure that everybody feels like they um, are contributing to the process.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like I would be the comedic relief coach. I could certainly help there a little bit.
No,
So,
yeah. So the people, if they knew your background, you are freakishly smart. And so, I mean, I
thank you.
all those test scores, Temple University. I mean, all that stuff is, you know, um, it's awesome. You're a strength coach, and strength coaches many times are educationally and intelligence based. Are they are at a high level, even though we come across as maybe a meathead, but you particularly, I know that the intelligence process in your world is huge, which is awesome. So no,
Well,
it's
thank you. I
give you a little,
appreciate that,
yeah.
and I'm glad this podcast is just turning into us complimenting each other for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah,
So, okay, well, we did touch on technology, and from my time at Tennessee, it was very clear that the mission of the program overall for Olympic strength and conditioning was to maximize the use of technology, and almost seemed like a philosophy of, well, we'll try everything to see what truly is the most effective and what the best technologies are. Can you talk about what technologies you view as the most beneficial for your program?
sure. So I see us, we use technology, but it's in a logical way, and it's not what I would say like super aggressive.
Mhm.
So that being said, if you think about it logically as a strength coach, would it be pretty cool to be able to understand the power capabilities of your lower body for your athletes?
Absolutely.
Yes. What's a good solid way to kind of measure that? Well, we can do a vertical jump and we can do a broad jump. We can also use force plates. And then we get to figure out a couple more things. We get to see left and right stuff. We get to see rate of force development. So I see that and I'm like, that's pretty cool. We should get force plates. Cool. Let's do that. Now, then we go along to the next line and we say, okay, well, it would be kind of nice to see some power outputs of the athletes when they're training. So if we can do some velocity based training and get the athletes to connect or to use some auto regulation specialties where we're, hey, stay above zero point 0.7 meters per second. If you drop below that, that's, you got to take the weight back down. So it helps us if you've got 35 people out there, it helps to set some guidelines on on controlling the weight of the barbell for your athletes, making sure that they are pushing at a level. It helps if they have a kind of an intention of lifting with speed. Um, I have directly seen over time athletes attacking coming out of the squat or coming off their chest on a bench. Uh, Super aggressive second pulls when they see that, oh, that was a 0.6. Okay, and hit it again. Oh, that was a 0.7. They get that immediate feedback. So there's a process of that that's important, and I would like to use that. So there came velocity based training. So that's how the technology kind of flows. Now, we can do functional movement assessments and we can view and screen and go through testing. And I like that. But I'll test somebody and they might be different if you tested them. So, geez, it would be kind of cool if there was a way to get um, a better, more consistent process uh, and less subjective in the testing. And that's where Fismodo came from. So is it the end of the world? No. Can I get a great FMS scan on somebody and go through a movement assessment? Yes. But can I do it on and utilize a computer breakdown to evaluate shin angle and shoulder positioning and posture and anterior movement of the sternum? I mean, so there's different aspects that can be done where you can utilize technology. And then now I can actually do a functional movement assessment on a weekly basis for everyone and
Yeah.
get some feedback for them and give them some actionable things to do from a mobility aspect that's based on their scan. So again, it's a logical progression and use of technology, um, and uh, I'm also aware of the cost of things, and finding um, what can be the most cost effective. That a lot of times coming from the Olympic sports side, it's not just automatic that you're going to be able to drop $100,000 on something. So finding things that are cost effective, finding things that are logically productive in your program, that's is what using technology is like for me. Um, and are we doing a little things with muscle oxygen content and doing some different type stuff? Yes, but it takes time to integrate and to spread it throughout the program. And so I use technology, but I only use it if it gives us actionable data and gives us logical information that we can use to program better, to create increases or decreases in volume and intensity. And so I see myself using technology, but I'm not a technology junkie.
Mhm. And that's how it felt. I mean, certainly when I was able to observe the programs, it felt like it was a something that was supplemental that only helped, but it never was the main thing that took away.
Yes. Oh,
Okay,
you still got to hang and bang. You still
absolutely,
and you still got to rock and roll. So
absolutely. That's amazing. So if you did have to pick one technology that you felt stood out above the others, or if you could only use one for the rest of your career, what would you most likely choose?
it would be a force plate combination.
Force play.
Now, I say that, um, and uh, mostly with the help of, we have a guy here now, Dr. Austin Smith, and so he's been able to, um, you know, to have us use force plates in a more functional way. Yes, we get our vertical jump. Yes, we get an RSI. That helps with my recovery process. What's going on? How do the athletes look? Uh, are we hitting progressions? Are we at the goal level that we need to be on a week to week basis from a recovery standpoint? So we're utilizing that stuff from a recovery standpoint. But also, you've got a isometric mid-thigh pull process, which can be a neat way to evaluate uh, absolute strength at all times of the year, not just when you kind of come to the peak at the end of the off season. So the way it's set up, it's safe, and it's something where you get a lot of good information on did the athletes maintain the strength that you're looking at.
Mhm.
Obviously, RSI and vertical jump, did the athletes maintain the power that you would like for them to have maintained throughout the season? So the force plate does a really good job with that. We have software that we put our workouts on. The athletes can access things on their phone. Everything's updated. We can print reports on volumes and intensities and graphically see 1RM variations as we go along. I don't even see that as technology anymore. I just see that as, computers using them in the weight room. Uh, and of course, there's the velocity train that we talked about. So all that stuff is cool, but just to go straight up, if I could only have one thing
Yeah.
other than, being able to write programs for 600 people, it would be the force plate.
Excellent, excellent. We've been very fortunate here at Appalachian State to have velocity-based training. We're trying to get some force plates in this summer, so I'm trying to make you proud over here. I
There's some
want to
good
know.
stuff. There is some good stuff with,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, I did want to talk about because we did touch on load management a little bit, and
yeah.
so something that has come up in our conversations in the past that I thought was incredibly interesting, especially in a time where ACL injuries are one of the biggest topics, and people, coin themselves the ACL doctor about prevention, right? You spoke about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was during your time at Arizona, it was 9 years you were the director.
Yes. I was there
And
for 10 years.
10 years. Okay. And then in that time with football, you did not have an ACL injury. Is that
We had
correct?
a 6-year span without ACL.
6 year span. Yes. Okay. That's perfect.
It was
And so
years.
you attributed that in part to your relationship with the head coach at the time. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that process
Sure.
and what you felt was so valuable?
Yeah. So if you go in and you look at program design, you know, my stuff was not, it wasn't any different program design wise, although I was very sensitive to team fatigue, team load. We weren't tracking anything, but you can feel, what the fatigue, of it.
Absolutely.
And by communicating with the coaches and the head coach and being at practice and the whole thing, you get an idea uh, of how they're doing as a whole. If they're flat, if they're rocking, the energy feel in practice is big. So the head coach and I would always communicate. Yes. So last week was very hard, coach. Let me know what you're seeing in the players. And we can make some adjustments. We can look at going through some download. So we had that level of communication where there's some strategic times in a season. There's bye weeks. There's times when you're, playing certain games that no one likes to talk about that you should win and stuff like that. So all of that, it's really a load management process that I felt was the most important thing. And the coach he wasn't just like, we're lining up and banging. No, we're just going to push as hard as we can. He would ebb and flow. And this is Dick Tomey at the University of Arizona, who was previously at the University of Hawaii. So he did have an ability to listen. He was not your conventional strength coach. Nowadays, football coaches are moving into communicating and and working with the sports science person, because it it can make it can give your program an edge. So now even the most hardcore of people are listening to load management, when to go harder, when to go easier, what's it looking like for this week's practice. So I felt that as a whole, was it the RDLs that we did? Was it the resistance sprinting, the progressions between resistance sprinting and top speed mechanics and high speed running? There's all sorts of little management things that you look at, but ultimately it was being able to have an understanding of recovery of the team, energy level of the team, and being able to make adjustments. Certain times we're going to rock and roll, certain times we're going to pull off. It wasn't just fire and brimstone every day.
Wow, and I mean that goes directly back to what you were mentioning earlier. There wasn't a large amount of changes in the coaching styles, right? It's just understanding and communicating with the athletes. So,
Yes.
I think that is so interesting too, because I remember in our previous season with the women's basketball team, we used a tracking software, and each day we would track obviously the overall internal load for the athletes, and then on Mondays we would have a staff meeting. We would talk about, okay, what should our practices look like for this week? And I mean, before I even read the reports, I could easily tell you what level day each day was, and then how the athletes are feeling. So, that technology can be beneficial, but it certainly helps to have a grasp with your team and understand them.
Yes. Yeah. That the coach's eye having that feeling, um, is definitely, uh, it's definitely important. And so being around the athletes and knowing the athletes and having a feel for the flow of everything is definitely important. And that process with our coaching staff at the University of Arizona was great.
Absolutely. And so, well, let me ask you, how do you balance that load management? Um, you know, some coaches may view that as taking it easy, right? In a world where in strength and conditioning, collegiate strength and conditioning, it's supposed to be this mental toughness deal. A lot of times, view our profession as. So, how do you balance that understanding when we need to back off of the athletes versus the times where you do want to develop that mental toughness?
Yeah. So you when you're going hard, it's hard. And so if you were always, oh, we need to back off, oh, we need to back off, oh, we need to back off, then it would be like, that it would start to feel like, oh, we're always just trying to cut things down. But
Mhm.
so there's hard times and there's easier times. So there has to be a balance in that process. And you know for me, we get into that process of, it's not just, there's very hard, but there's also a moderately hard. So it's
Mhm.
not down, it's just down somewhat. So there's a process of changing up those intensity zones. And so you have to have a balance. If you're always coming after just like, oh, back off and rest, then that would always, you would get that reputation, that feel that, you're almost trying to reduce things too much all the time. So ultimately it is finding that balance. And if you project your model and you look at, being a good strength coach is not about, necessarily have some special exercise that you're going to pull out, or
Hmm.
it's really just understanding timelines that you have and how you want to manipulate and work through a timeline. So if you've got 9 weeks or 12 or 4 or 7, how do you want to work through that the next 7 weeks? And understanding the annual process and knowing innately, obviously, off-season developmental, in-season maintenance, but there's always power transitions. There's times even within an in-season that you're loading. There's times in an off-season that you're unloading. So understanding that big picture is a very important process. And if you lay out the game plan and you got a bye week, you're communicating with the coaching staff. That bye week is going to be a week that you want to do some hammering.
Hmm.
And so if you're going to do some hammering during the bye week, the week before, you could technically have a lighter, power oriented, speed based, lower volume, higher intensity type training. And so you just lay out the logical progressions of, ideally, because of this here, this is why we would like to do something speed, power, slightly reduced volume, intensity oriented. This is why you would like to load it here. This is why we'd like to go moderate hard here. And you lay out the plan. Then the plan may slightly adjust, but you got to be ready for tweaking it. But that helps in the communication process with the coaches. If you've showed them the plan, showed them when you're going to go hard, when you want to go down, then you try to start working towards that plan. And so that's how you manage telling a coach that maybe we should back down, because it's all the stuff that's going to come before and after that download week. What happened
Hmm.
before? Probably you did something pretty monstrous and
Yep.
or harder, or you ran 3 weeks in a row fairly good. So that download is now something that you're programming for. um, and if you can show that to the coach, then your communication goes much better, because he or she is now looking at, you've organized things for 9 weeks, so let's try to find a flow that would work. Do they sometimes, do extra running out of the blue? Yes. So you do have to make some adjustments, but having the plan allows you to know when you're going to back off, and it's easier to sell to the
Yep.
coaches.
Absolutely. And I think that the communication is huge. But it's funny that you mentioned that at the end of, obviously we do have some days that are planned to be light days, and then certain things may
Somebody
occur
got in
during
trouble
practice.
and they're
Yep.
running, and so it changes.
Nothing.
But uh, but you have to be able to adjust to that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, so we do talk about load management, and something that I was able to learn from you throughout this process of working with you was you use something called INOL values to essentially help you with that load management process. Could you give us a quick pitch of what INOL values are? Just a quick breakdown.
Yeah. So uh, utilizing INOLs allows you to evaluate your program. So it's really a cross-checking mechanism that
Okay.
you can use to evaluate your program. It is looking at one number that is really an expression of what's happening with the volume and intensity. So volume and intensity. If you got super high volume, we're going, oh man, that's huge volume. But if your intensity is low, it it can what is the end product? If it was super high volume and super high intensity, what is the end product? So same thing. Changing set one way you can look at the combination of volume and intensity. So uh, I initially started off looking at things from a work index. I called it a work index, and it was looking at, training is not necessarily always just, we have, oh, it's my heavy day or it's my light day. Well, a light day can be one of those brutal days if you're really stacking the volume. A heavy day, sometimes those are the easy days. You go up and touch 85% for a double, touch 90 for a single. That's like easier metabolically. It's less metabolically demanding on your system. So it was understanding that process. It's not necessarily heavy or light, but let's start communicating with hard or easy or easier workouts. And so looking at something with Prilipin's charts, it kind of originated with that, looking at 600 Olympic athletes programs, and 47 of them were gold medalists in weightlifting over 30 years. And, these zones of intensity and volumes were key. Well, then that was Prilipin's charts. Then you look into Christoph's understanding and evaluation of Prilipin's charts, understanding also that it's coming primarily from Olympic lifters. And a lot of times for lack of a better term, American periodization, we might do things that are, higher reps at times in the weight room. So how hard, what is that like? I mean, a lot of times old school Olympic coaches, they won't even count a set unless it's 80% or above. So looking at, different volumes and intensity ranges, Christoph put together something called INOL values, which is just relatively simple math, very simple math. Multiply by percentages and do a couple of divisions, and you now have an INOL number. So I just write programs, and then I'll cross check what the INOL values were, and now I can do some program design within my programming with the workoutsmart.com that evaluates my INOL values for me as I write it. So it's immediate kickback. That's a 135 workout. That's a 0.8. That's a 1.5 workout. That's a 0.97. So we can flow, and then you start to categorize. And it's not my INOL number is going to be different from yours. Your top INOL value might not go above 1.4. Mine might reach a 1.7. So everybody's a little different. The key thing is when you write a program that you want to go hard. So for you, a hard is a 1.4. And then if you want to go moderately hard or easy, you would then do your calculations to come up with a 0.9 or a 0.65. And then now you've got your combinations. Let's look at, you're in a GPP phase. You're doing volume based. You have a workout that scores a 1.1. 12 weeks later, you're in your max peaking phase. You have a workout that scores 1.1. Completely different volumes, completely different intensities, but they were hard. So that's the process. It's just gauging what the work index is. How hard are you working? And whether you're in high rep phase or high weight phase, it's trying to express that into one number. So that's INOLs. And it's just weights are sets, reps, pounds, weights. It's all numbers. So you start to be able to work together and find one number that expresses volume and intensity together, and then you start to work that within your program. It's very, very simple, nothing magic, mathematical evaluations to objectively check your program, and then you move forward and rock and roll.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it is a simple process once you are able to fully break it down,
Yeah.
but you did a great job of, in about 2 to 3 minutes of actually fully synthesizing all that information, because it took me about 6 months of just staring at charts and everything to somehow figure it out. So, are there any more resources that you could direct people to if they were interested in learning more about INOL values?
So, when I started diving in, I would just type in INOL,
Hmm.
and then you can start to find some stuff. But I did break some things down in strength training like a scientist, and through the workoutsmart.com. You can go onto workoutsmart.com and go to the Learning Center and utilize the Learning Center, which explains a lot of things about programming and what we're doing. But that strength training like a scientist breaks everything down from Prilipins to INOLs. It shows you the step-by-step math steps, and it's super, super easy. And so you just get an idea. And when we talk to the interns, about program design, it's like Okay, so do you know you just went 5 sets of 15 on front squat? Okay, so let's calculate that for a
They
second.
have no clue how outrageous that is.
Yeah. And
Yep.
if we calculated that, that's it's going to be close to like a 2,
Mhm.
on the, and we've been using 1.1 and 0.65 and zero point 0.9. So, it gets close to a 2 or a little above 2.3. And that is a crazy program. So, that it helps them to say, oh, okay, so if I'm starting out my first week of my off-season program, do you want to go out there and knock everybody in the head with a sledgehammer? No, but I wouldn't. I would logically say, well, okay, let's have a hard workout. We want to rock. We want to
Mhm.
push this one pretty good, but only for like 8 minutes. And then for the most part, we want to flow people back into the workout. And so, how do you write a medium hard workout? Well, reference a few things and evaluate some stuff, and you get an idea, and you start to. It helps for even a new person to know the flow of how much is too much. And there's ways to look at training a muscle group one day, one exercise. What about 2 days? So you're going to train it twice. So what about legs on another day? Well, then you start to add up all of your leg days together. And a lot of my INOL values, I do also look at warm up procedures too, because
Mm.
if you're training at 80% that particular day, you got to get to 80%. So, and you got to do something at 50 and 60 and 70, you know, and so I do count those. Now, some of Prilipin's charts in the beginning, he did not count warm ups. So once we relate them over to the INOL values with the Christoph scoring system, then mine are generally going to be a little higher because I do count warm ups as well. If 1.5 was about the highest that most people would go, mine ended up being a 165 because I count warm ups. So
Mhm.
there's just little things, but if you count warm ups exactly the same thing, then everything is balanced throughout your whole system. Um, so that's just a little bit about the INOL values and how to use them. But yeah, it's very simple. Just a great cross-checking mechanism.
Absolutely. And I do encourage anybody listening to research that a little bit further on workoutsmart.com. It's spelled INOL, correct?
Yes,
Um,
INOL. Yeah.
Excellent. And I remember there was when this was first introduced to me, I went back and looked at a program that I used when I was about 12 years old because I bought Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding,
Oh yeah.
which is the one of the famous workouts. And I got my workouts from it. And I think the INOL value for like one workout was about like a 2.3. And I was like, okay, this is like our light day specifically for Arnold too. I just didn't really realize that all these
Grinding.
guys were taking performance enhancing drugs as well, which
You're like, why don't I? Why? When is this going to happen? Yeah.
yep. Different vitamin regimen for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's one last thing I wanted to touch on,
Yeah.
and I thought it was amazing and very well deserved. Is that you were given the award of collegiate strength and conditioning coach through the NSCA for this past year? Can you just talk to me a little bit about what that process was like, and then what it meant
Yeah.
to you?
That was a cool thing. I mean, initially you have to be nominated by your staff.
Mhm.
So it was nice. And then you know we've been having some good years here. Going from 50 or something in the Learfield Directors Cup, to 25, and then to 15 and to 12, and I think now we're sixth so far this year. We still got to finish
Wow.
strong. So that, yeah, it was neat. And having been um, you know certified in 1989, and as a professional resource, the NSCA does a great job. Any big association that represents a segment of a working population, in this case, strength coaches, and the personalities, the intensity, that's a difficult job to be helpful. But the
Mhm.
NSCA has always been super professional, a lot of great resources. It creates a foundation of communication to begin the process, and that's all you can ask for. So I appreciated that process with the NSCA. It was fun for me. Um, to go this year and to see everybody and to see Boyd Epley, who's still kicking butt. And I remember sitting in his office as a senior in high school at the University of Nebraska, and we were talking lifting back in
Wow.
1984. So, what a crazy full circle moment it was, and just seeing everybody, and so it was great. It was great to get it at the, dare I say it, end of my career. Uh, and ultimately just to have been away for a while and then to come back, and to be a part of something that's way bigger than yourself in a team environment at the University of Tennessee. All that stuff was big, so it was fun, and I enjoyed the process, and it was a good trip.
Well, it was very well deserved. I mean,
Thank you.
certainly, and all the work you do, especially, I mean, with that Tennessee program as a whole, but also work with veterans and active service members as well. I think it's a fantastic program that you run over at Tennessee, and it brings value to people as well too. And I think
Yeah,
everybody who is able to work there has left feeling certainly valued, especially because of your infectious positivity.
it's fun, just having fun.